This is the Living Vertizontal Podcast, brought to you by The Church at Riverstone, a fellowship of the Church of the Nazarene in Madera, California. We are a podcast that discusses the intersection of Scripture and our lives. Together, we continue the conversation that was started each preceding Sunday morning in our worship gathering.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick.
And I'm Natasha.
And we are the Living Vertizontal Podcast with you this week as we continue our journey through the Gospel of Luke together. As a quick reminder, last week we looked at Luke chapter 9, verses 37 through 50. And in this passage, it included the story of the demon-possessed boy, a second communication of Jesus' passion, or like the suffering that he was going to endure, and an argument amongst the disciples. Together, we reflected on Jesus' patience with the crowds and also with his disciples, who once again failed to grasp what it truly means to fully participate in the kingdom of God, even though he had taught and modeled it many, many different times. In the end, we recognize that the way of humility, following Jesus step by step, is the only path to fully participate in and embody his kingdom here and now. This week, we are moving on into Luke chapter 9, verses 51 through 62, where we see Jesus and his disciples rejected by Samaritans, and also other interactions with other individuals about the cost of following after him. I'm going to be reading for us today, so let's read Luke chapter 9, verses 51 through 62. As the day of his ascension approached, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. He sent messengers on ahead who went into a village of the Samaritans to make arrangements for him. But the people there refused to welcome him because he was heading for Jerusalem. When the disciples, James and John, saw this, they asked, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them?" But Jesus turned and rebuked them, and he and his disciples went on to another village. As they were walking along the road, someone said to Jesus, "I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Then he said to another man, "Follow me." The man replied, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Let the dead bury their own dead. You, however, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Still another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but first let me bid farewell to my family." Then Jesus declared, "No one who puts his hand to the plow and then looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." All right, so there's our passage, and where are we going as we look at this thing?
So right from the beginning, we get this exchange with the Samaritans, and it seems kind of out of place because if you don't understand the tension that exists between the Samaritans and the Israelites, this seems just... It seems unusual and kind of strange.
Well, because to this point, like everybody accepts him. Even in the Decapolis, they said, "Go away from us," but there was still like this, I don't know, wasn't full rejection.
I mean, you have Roman centurions coming to him for help. So this is kind of a little bit surprising that the people of Samaria are not wanting to help Jesus or his followers.
Yes.
And so if we dive into Israel's history a little bit, so we have to go way back. So all the way back to the early kings. So we the very first king of Israel is King Saul, and then he is later replaced by King David. And then King David's son, King Solomon, comes, and he's kind of the last king that exists where there's unity across the entire kingdom, of Israel. And so with Solomon's death, there is then this tension that arises, and it's the result of his son, Rehoboam, who takes over the throne. And he trusts advisors, probably, erroneously, but they basically encourage him not to relent in the current taxation that's really putting a lot of pressure and stress on the people of the kingdom of Israel. And so they're like, you need to show a firm upper hand. And so he takes their advice. Young doesn't necessarily have the same wisdom that Solomon is so famous and renowned for. And so as a result of that, the northern tribes grow very, very unhappy with this new king.
Sure.
And so unhappy, in fact, that they crown themselves a new king, Jeroboam, and declare him king of Israel. And this moment marks the split of the kingdom. Where you have the southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, part of the kingdom of Judah.
Yes.
And now you have the northern tribes of the kingdom of Israel.
Yes.
So fast forward then a little bit of time. And so we get to around 722 roughly BC, when the Assyrian Empire come in and they crush the northern kingdoms. And conquering them, winning in battle is one thing, but they basically decimate an entire people group. They move in, they haul off all of their elite, all of the wealthy, all of the priests. They take them into exile. So you're left with a conglomerate of people, but these are the people without means. They're the kind of just the nobodies. And then they don't just stop there. They also allow people from other conquered nations, so Babylon and beyond, to then move into these northern kingdoms and begin to set down roots. So now you have, in what used to be the northern kingdom of Israel, you now have a mixed people group that is representative of both Judaism, but then also all of the other religions that are prevailing at that time. And so it becomes very diluted, very mixed. A lot of the culture is lost, some preserved, but a lot of it is mixed and intermingled with the other forms of religious worship from secular outside
various
influence.
nations. Yeah.
Right. And so now this group is seen as less than, not pure.
Kind of like a mutt.
Right. And so this distinguishes them from Jerusalem. And to make matters worse, when they go to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, the people living in the northern kingdoms, this region of Samaria, they declare, no, we're going to build our own temple on Mount Gerizim and not in Jerusalem. And so their religious practices are focused there. So they don't see Jerusalem as
a
the
religious
hub.
Epicenter.
They don't see it as the capital, because since the northern kingdom established and declared their own king of Israel, they no longer even view Jerusalem as their capital city. Rather, Samaria has been their capital city. And so there's just a huge amount of conflict that has been building over the course of thousands of years. And so you're seeing the playing out of that generations later. In this interaction with Jesus. And so this is not targeted at Jesus. It's not targeted at his followers. This is really targeted at anybody who is going to Jerusalem to worship and thereby declaring their allegiance to Jerusalem as the true temple. And that obviously rubs the Samaritans the wrong way, because they believe differently about this. And so because of that, they don't extend the same hospitality that would typically be extended in this region. And so you're getting to see a little bit of that played out here.
So essentially, even though we don't, when we come to the text and are reading it, even though we don't necessarily know it, what we should understand as we come to it is that there is this pretty extreme tension that exists between the people that Jesus is sending his disciples ahead to, the Samaritans, and his disciples who are Jews. Like this is kind of like oil and water. These do not mix. This is not supposed to come together. This is not gonna be an easy situation. And
right, this is not a surprising rejection.
Sure. Okay, so right from the start, we have bad blood, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we move into this passage, feeling this tension that exists, I think one of the biggest things that really stood out to me is a result of a carry forward from our passage last week and our conversation from last week. And so if you would kind of go back with me for a moment at the tail end of our passage in Luke 9:37 through 50, specifically looking at like verses 49 through 50, you have the disciples talking to Jesus, and they say, "Master," said John, "we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he does not accompany us." And Jesus' response was, "Do not stop him," Jesus replied, "for whoever is not against you is for you." So there has been this stage of expectation set for the disciples who are still learning, right? We talked heavily last week about how Jesus is patient with them as they are learning what it means to fully participate in his kingdom. And so a part of these growing pains was them saying, well, they're not with us. And he's like, but if they're not opposed to us, then they are for us. And so this kind of expanded their understanding of, okay, so they're okay in the kingdom. Like this is part of what it means.
There's more on mission than just us.
Right. There's more people on mission than just us. This is great. So their perspective of the kingdom is expanding. Now, you bring that into our conversation for today. Again, we have this new learned idea that whoever is not against us is for us. And now we walk into this situation. And you have the disciples go and try to make a way for them to have a place to hang out, to stay. And instead of them being received, instead of experiencing a people that is for them, they experience rejection. Verse 53, but the people there refused to welcome him because he was heading for Jerusalem. And so they experience this rejection. And so again, in my mind, going back to last week, the disciples are learning, gradually allowing their understanding to be expanded. They've expanded to the point of whoever is not against us is for us, which then means if they are against us, then they are not for us, and we must not be for them. And you see that come out here with their response.
Well, and this is their own conclusion, right?
Yeah, yes.
Before you go.
Jesus had not spoken on this with them. Well, I would say he'd spoken in a contrary way to their mindset, but he becomes clear about it even more so in a second. But their response is, when the disciples James and John saw this rejection, made this conclusion in their mind, I'm assuming based on what they say, they said, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them?"
I mean, obviously, they're heretics, right? So very much in our Elijah type fashion. I mean, Elijah called down fire from
We've got
heaven.
to set them straight.
And so, yeah, we're going to do like Elijah and call down fire from heaven.
Yeah, because since they are not standing with us, they are standing against us. And since they have stood against us, we must stand against them and what they stand for, because they don't stand for what we stand for or who we stand for. And so they say, do you want us to do this? And before I kind of go to the statement that Jesus makes, I will say, I'm about to be very critical of what they say. And I think we should be critical in certain respects. But at the same time, their request is also a request that is full of faith and expectation of what they are capable of because of the power that that Jesus has passed on to them. We talked about, weeks ago when they were sent out on mission, God sent them out in power and authority. And so they have this expectation. Again, they're still learning of what that looks like, but they have this expectation of the power and authority that has been handed them by Jesus. And so, yes, probably a little bit of Elijah is being read into this, but the fact that they even expect that they can participate in a power like that helps us understand that they have a pretty big faith right now. Because if it was me right now, I don't think that I could even honestly say, do you want me to call down fire from heaven? Because obviously I can't do that. I would be something more like, do you want me to go tackle those people? Because that's what I can do. I can't call down fire from heaven. So I will say, before I'm too critical of them,
They clearly have big faith.
They clearly have big faith, and that's a big deal. And I think that should be honored and recognized even as we look at this. They have big faith. Now that positive is identified, I think it's also very important for us to recognize that Jesus is continuing to help them understand what it looks like for them to participate and be members of this kingdom. And so Jesus' response is not just, no, don't do that. It's not just, that's a bad idea. We read in verse 55, Jesus turns and he rebuked them. And then they went on to another village. Like, in some respects, what Jesus does, what the disciples do, it flies by in a matter of 2 verses, and it almost seems like a footnote, like not even that big of a deal. But I think that what happens here is major. Yes, the faith of the disciples, yes, the misguided proclamation of the disciples, but also this rebuking that Jesus does is a big deal. And the reason why I say that is because, like, rebuking, again, isn't just dismissing them or saying no. Like, this is something where Jesus is correcting a misguided, like, spirit within them. So I've just identified that they must have great faith to make a proclamation by this, but it is a misguided faith. And so this rebuke that Jesus issues, again, it's not just a no, don't do that. It is a very strong, when you look up the Greek word that's used, it's used in the same verses where Jesus rebukes demons. Like, that's the word for rebuke that's being used here. It's not just a simple correction. Like, it's a I must dismiss this spirit within you. And so Jesus comes pretty hard against this mentality because he is trying to help them understand, once again, you have a misconception of what it looks like to participate in my kingdom. This is more than just, like, we shouldn't just read this and be like, oh, he rebuked it, move on. What does that mean then for us, that he rebuked this mindset, this mentality, this faith that they had? And as I think about that, like, the mindset they have is whoever is not standing with us then is standing against us, and we must stand against them. But Jesus' rebuke corrects that in a way to say, no. You're right. My kingdom that I've already helped you guys understand, if they are not against us, then they are for us. But if we step even further into that, and now we've encountered somebody who is against us, what I need you to understand is just because they are against us doesn't mean that we are against them. There is not this open invitation for you to stand in opposition to others just because they oppose you. That's not what it looks like for you to participate in my kingdom. And we're going to go on here in a moment to talk about, like, the cost of discipleship. But if we think back to all the different conversations we have had to this point, specifically when he sends them out on mission, Jesus says, when somebody rejects you, shake off the dust from your sandals and move on. He doesn't say condemn them. He doesn't say call down fire on them. He just says shake off your sandals and move on. And when we had talked about it back then, we had identified that this was more than likely because there's the potential for a future response. It leaves when we just shake off our sandals and move on, it leaves the door open for the continued work of the Spirit to take place. The mindset that the disciples have to call down fire in this moment slams the door of opportunity for the Samaritans to respond, for the Spirit to work, because if fire gets called down from heaven on these people, what happens? They're destroyed. The door is shut. And Jesus is like, no, that's not what it looks like in my kingdom. My kingdom is always a kingdom where the door is open, where I am inviting you to invite others. And if and when they reject you, I am inviting you to leave the door open for my Spirit to continue to work in their lives so that maybe in the future, their response is different. And so, I mean, I kind of think about that for ourselves because it's always important. Great. So this is what the passage is saying, but what does that then mean for us? And I think it's fortunately for us, I don't think it's necessarily too extreme of a step that we have to take to understand what Jesus might be trying to communicate to us. I don't think most people, like I said earlier, like, I don't think I could call down fire. I don't think most people think, okay, well, That person has rejected me, so I'm going to call down fire on them. But I do think that we live in a culture where when we find people who stand against us, or when we encounter people who stand against us, we are very quick to stand in opposition.
Well, we almost feel like it's our God-given call
Yes.
to oppose. And maybe it's not a physical fire, but it's words of fire.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth noting that you mentioned earlier that the disciples, they have clearly this big faith, and we sometimes, like, we have big faith with our convictions that Jesus has revealed to us or given to us personally. And we have to remember that if our big faith, we put that into action without checking with Jesus first, we run the same risk of having big, bold faith, but misplaced faith.
That slams the door in people's faces.
And really prevents opportunity for loving people to him, which is what we've been asked to do to begin with. And I think sometimes we're our own worst enemy.
I think there's this, I don't know if it's necessarily a saying, but a series of sayings that has been repeated a lot, and I've heard, let's not let people know what we're against, but let's let them know what we're for or who we're for. And I think that that's a prevailing mentality or a desire for most of us. But the truth is, I think too often, because of the strong convictions that we hold, those convictions, even though we think we're trying to demonstrate what we are for in our convictions, really what we are demonstrating is that because we are for these convictions, we are against you. We are in opposition to your mindset. We are in opposition to your feelings, your beliefs, your understandings, who you are, your identity, any of that. And I think Jesus is very clear with his disciples here in this interaction, but also in other places, like I said, in the calling or in the sending the 12 out. Jesus is very clear of his invitation to leave the door open for his Spirit to work. And I know that may be very hard for us because we really want to see resolution happen. I mean, for all the good reasons, we want to see people transformed. And these convictions that we hold, it's like they're not just there for no reason. And so we want to see people step in line with those convictions because we recognize that means that they're transformed. But we have got to be very careful at reading our own situation into somebody else, number one. And number two, we've got to be very careful being so for our convictions that we slam the door on the ability, or I don't want to say the ability for the Spirit to work, because obviously the Spirit can work even beyond us, but we can really dampen the ability for the Spirit to work when we are too dogmatic about our convictions.
Yeah, and I think it's appropriate that this rebuke comes right before a conversation about the cost of discipleship, because setting aside what you know to be true, what you know to be right, because Jesus said, okay, they're against you, love them anyway. And so because that's Jesus's rebuke to his disciples, I feel like then to say, okay, well, it's going to cost you something is a very appropriate direction to head next. And we see this as we move through these different interactions that Jesus has with, three different scenarios are highlighted. And
so maybe it would be best for us to kind of just work through them, each of the three individually, maybe see what might be at issue for each of these people as they come to Jesus and say, I will follow you. And then he has a response and what that response might be pointing to or calling out within that person.
And so the first one comes along and says, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus's reply, I'm sure knowing his heart, says, foxes have dens and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. And this one is a big one for me because this focuses on security.
Absolutely.
It focuses on all the things that we want to have around us to hedge our bets, to, the rainy day fund, like all of those things. Jesus is saying, listen, like there is no permanence. There is no material security in where I'm calling you, in where I'm going. And if you're going to follow, you have to recognize that there's going to be moments where you will have no security but in me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a big cost. It's a big ask. And I think especially in our culture, because our culture is so ingrained in this security mentality. We have, we put away money for retirement. We have a savings account. So we have a rainy day fund in case something goes wrong, in case, we have an emergency accident. We're supposed to have, 3 months of our monthly expenses put away in a, rainy day fund. Like all of these financial planning practices, which aren't bad in and of themselves. But they can become a distraction to what Jesus is asking us and calling us to do if they become the rule for us, and following Jesus is not the rule.
Yeah.
And so I think being willing to let go of the things that make us feel safe and secure for Jesus's cause, for his kingdom call, I think that's important. Being willing to hold onto everything with open hands is an important part of following after him. And those moments are very, very difficult. They're very trying. But there's so much growth that occurs. We've talked a lot about how Jesus has been calling people to dependence on him in recent weeks. The theme of dependence is just so heavy in in this chapter, really. And I think here that this statement just kind of summarizes it.
Yep.
It says, you will have nothing that you can rely on but me.
Yep.
And that's what it costs to follow me.
Yep.
Are you sure? Count the cost.
Yeah, and I think, as I look at this one, I would imagine this man coming to Jesus saying, I will follow you wherever you go, probably carries some misconceptions of his own, like the disciples do, like those we've seen about what it means to be the Messiah. But even if he didn't, like even if he understood, okay, that's what it means to be the Messiah, what he has watched is full provision at every step. Like they never go hungry because they have a couple of loaves and fishes and it gets multiplied and everybody has their fill. He's watched people come back from the dead. He's watched people be healed of ailments. He has potentially watched all of this take place. And in a way, in seeing that, he sees security.
Mm-hmm.
If I just am with Jesus, I don't have to worry about food. I don't have to worry about death. I don't have to worry about getting sick. Like I am going to be taken care of. And Jesus's response is, you don't like that. I'm not about that kind of security. That's not what this is about. My kingdom, the kingdom that I am coming to usher in, the kingdom that I am trying to point everybody to, the kingdom of God is not about your comfortability and your security in this life. It's about the reality of the reign of God. The reign of God that was instituted so long ago that got so broken, it's a restoration of that reign and a recognition of where you are at in that process. And so for you to come to me with expectations of security, I think you're coming to me with the wrong expectations. And I think that there's a lot of that even that exists today where people become Christians because they're going through a hard time, right? But then they respond and they say, I'm going to follow after Jesus because Jesus is going to take care of all these things. And there is this expectation that Jesus will provide, and Jesus very well might provide, but he might not.
Well, he always provides, but he may not provide in the way that you're expecting or that you're requesting. I mean, I think about John the Baptist as you're mentioning this. Like Jesus brought people back from the dead, yes. But John the Baptist died.
Yeah.
he very much died, and Jesus did not resurrect him. He did
Correct.
not in this life, right? Not in this
Not in that
worldly
moment, yeah.
kingdom. There that we don't see that. And I think a lot of times Jesus says no. And this is, we have to trust in those moments too. When Jesus says no, we have to trust and still remain dependent on him, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
And that is expensive.
So here in this first interaction, Jesus' invitation is to hold loosely to those things in life that provide security. Because when you follow me, none of this is guaranteed. I'm the guarantee. Mm-hmm. Walking in this kingdom is the guarantee. Everything else, hold loosely. And so as we move on to verse 59, where, another one Jesus says to one of them, "Follow me." But the man replies, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." What are we seeing here? Like what is being addressed here in this one?
So I've heard different things about this. And so some scholars speculate, well, maybe the man's father isn't even dead. So this is more about my duty to accomplish other tasks first. But I think no matter how you look at it, whether this man's father is dead now or whether he has to go wait and return.
Wait for him to die.
Yeah, wait for him to die, and then take care of his household affairs, get everything in order, whatever it is. I think the point of this still remains the same. And that is that the call is now.
Yeah. I mean, different than the first interaction where it's the person coming to Jesus claiming, "I will follow you." This one, the invitation is from Jesus himself. Like Jesus says, "Follow me." We've seen this happen before. We've seen Jesus say to people, "Follow me." And we have seen their response. We have watched people walk away from their occupation. We have watched people get up from their tax collector table and the responsibilities that are present there to the empire and everybody else around them. And they've heard the call to follow me, and they just get up and they walk away from it. We've watched people walk away from the catch of a lifetime, a wealth beyond what they could have imagined, sustenance beyond what they could have imagined. And Jesus' invitation was to follow me, and they immediately got up from those things. They walked away from them and responded because the call was immediate. It was not for some time down the road. It was for now, and they recognized the urgency of the call and they went. This man, however, seems like he doesn't recognize the urgency of the call, the urgency of the invitation, right? Jesus, if we think about it in the context of the kingdom, Jesus is saying, "Come be a part of my kingdom." And it's like this man has said, "Yeah, I'd like to be a part of your kingdom, but just wait a little bit."
Yeah. We've had in working in youth ministry for years, we've had this conversation actually almost explicitly with a particular teenager where her heart was, I think I'm interested in this Christian stuff. I think following Jesus might be a good thing. But right now in my life, I really just want to be able to live for me. Yeah. I want to be able to do the things that, all the teenagers get to do. I want to participate in all that life has to offer. And then, maybe someday when I'm ready to settle down, then I can maybe follow Jesus. And I don't know, every time I read this passage of scripture, I feel like her story is not unique, and it maybe looks different for adults. But we really are, we're caught in a pursuit of 1,000 different things, 1,000 different duties that we have that aren't necessarily in and of themselves bad things. Yeah. But Jesus' call in your life is right now in the midst of doing the things that you are presently doing. Yeah. It's not divorced from it. It's in it, it's with it. And Jesus wants to use us right now in the midst of whatever it is that we're going through or whatever it is that we're living in. He has purpose and mission for us in that particular place.
Yeah, it seems like here in this interaction, in this exchange, there's as we've been talking about it, the thought that comes to my mind is that there is a lordship conversation happening. Jesus' invitation is follow me. And the crossroads that the man is at is, am I going to submit to that authority and that invitation to follow him and allow him to be Lord in my life? Or am I going to submit to the duty that I feel like I have to my family and allow that to be Lord in my life? So allow things of the world to lord over my life, to guide what I do, to dictate how I interact. Jesus's invitation here puts him at the crossroads of lordship. And Jesus doesn't pull any punches in other areas when he talks about this, that the invitation to follow me, the cost of discipleship, the identification with him, the being a Christian thing is a conversation on lordship. It is a conversation on surrender to the true king rather than allowing myself to be king or allowing the emperor to be king or whoever else or whatever else, fill in the blank. Like, the real issue at hand here is, who is Lord in my life? Is it Jesus or is it anything else? If it's not Jesus, if it's anything else, then you are in the wrong kingdom.
Well, and that even goes back to the first person that we were talking about. This is also a lordship conversation. If you're chasing and pursuing comforts and securities, that is contrary, potentially, to his lordship. You have to be chasing the king, and then whatever comes, comes.
Yep.
And so it's a backwards way of thinking. It's contrary to everything I feel like that's in the fiber of how we've been trained to care for ourselves, to have duty to or obligation to other things. Like, it's just different. It's contrary, and for that reason, it feels very expensive.
It's almost like it's an upside down way of thinking.
Almost.
And so we push on and we look at this last interaction. And so the first one was somebody coming to Jesus. Second one was Jesus calling to somebody. And then this third one is somebody else now coming to Jesus. And it says, I will follow you, Lord, but first let me bid farewell to my family. What do we think might be at stake here? It seems very similar to what we just encountered. However, maybe Jesus's response teases out some differences.
This one to me is a conversation kind of a little bit about loyalties. So you're divided. Your attentions are divided.
Yes.
And so the person before was a little different in that they wanted to have a one-track attention on following Jesus, but not now. And this one is more, I want to follow Jesus, but I also want to do this at the same time. So it's a not later thing. It's a both and. Can I just have both, Jesus? I'd like to do both.
Yeah.
And again, when we talk about that lordship conversation, you can't serve two masters.
Nope.
There is one king, and either you choose to subject yourself to his kingship, or you choose to embrace other things.
Yeah.
And it's not something that can be divided. And I think this is, this is again, it's expensive. It's expensive. Are you willing to give up everything for your king? Are you willing to follow him no matter the cost, no matter the insecurity, no matter the forfeiting of duty or responsibility or obligation, no matter his timing, no matter the relationships it will cost. It's a big ask. And Jesus is encouraging us as people who want to follow him, who proclaim to follow him. Consider this because it is a big deal. And I recognize that it is a big deal to live into my kingdom. But we have to fully embrace him as king, or his kingdom doesn't exist here the way that he intends it. We miss the fullness of it if we cannot submit ourselves to his lordship. As you journey with us, we recommend purchasing Midweek Meditations, A Journey Through Luke, Part 3, which is available for purchase on Amazon. Also, be sure to follow the Living Vertizontal podcast to stay current on all our new releases. To learn more about the Church at Riverstone, visit us at thechurchatriverstone.org.